All right. Good afternoon and welcome to Miss Walker's afternoon story time. We are continuing with our book from Ban This Book. We are picking up on chapter 36. And up until now, our main character, Amy Ann Ollivander, she kind of started off a little shy, didn't she, guys? She really didn't stick up for herself. She didn't talk much, and she felt very overwhelmed, didn't she? She lived in a house with two younger siblings, and her two younger sisters were much had big personalities and sort of took over things, didn't they? And mom and dad sort of took Amy Ann for granted, didn't they? And at school, she was pretty quiet too and never really stuck up for herself and never got in trouble and never spoke up in class. And then all of a sudden, her favorite book got banned from the library, didn't it? And she decided she was going to do something. So they started that banned book library locker where she was loaning out books to students, and they were all the books that had been taken out of the library. And they'd all been taken out of the library on the recommendation of one person, Mrs. Spencer. And she is one of her classmates' mom. Trey is his Mrs. Spencer's son. And Amy Ann kind of felt like Trey might be a spy and might not be, and ended up making friends with him. And at this point in the book, Amy Ann got caught with the books in her locker, and everybody found out what she was doing, and she got suspended for 3 days. And her mom and dad were surprised and upset with her that she had done that, but also sort of proud of her because she was sticking up and finally standing up for herself. Um, and now, let me see, at the end of this, her mom and dad had grounded her for a week. Even though they're proud of her, she had gone about doing the right thing the wrong way, and so she was grounded for a week. She and the way they grounded her was that she couldn't read anything except for stuff for school. So that's where we are. She just went into her bedroom and was really upset and crying, and her little sister left her favorite toy for her. So now we're starting chapter 36, The Latest Casualty. I was in my room that night planning my escape to Cameron Village Library from the mixed up files style when I heard something about Shelbourne Elementary on the television in the living room. It was late, and the new glow in the dark alarm clock I'd gotten for my birthday said it was 11:10. Alexis was already asleep across the room. I slipped out of bed and tiptoed down the hall to peek at the TV. They had pictures showing of my school while a woman explained all about the banned books library locker. It even showed picture of me from last year's yearbook. I squeaked, but covered my mouth enough that mom and dad didn't hear me. On the couch, I saw my mom put her hand to her forehead like she had a headache. Mrs. Spencer came on then. Fourth graders aren't old enough to make decisions like this for themselves, she said. That's why we have parents. That's why we have a school board. And the school board agreed those books were inappropriate for elementary school students, in many cases harmful. The books were removed from the library for their protection. The reporter talked about how this all began with a school board meeting where Mrs. Spencer got them to remove the books, and then a picture of Mrs. Jones came on the screen. At the center of the controversy is Shelbourne Elementary librarian Dr. Opal Jones, who has all along maintained that the book should remain available to all students. Mrs. Jones, decked out in her blue polka dot and white dots, appeared on the recorded interview. Every parent has a right to decide what their child can and can't read. What they cannot do is make that decision for everyone else, she said. It was the exact same thing she'd said at the board meeting. Tonight, Mrs. Jones became the latest casualties in what observers are calling the Battle of the Books, the reporter said. The reporter cut to the man in a suit. Under his name, it said he was a member of the school board. Whether deliberately or through negligence, Dr. Jones let those books circulate against express orders of the school board. As such, her contract was terminated. Her contract was terminated. That meant fired. Mrs. Jones had been fired, and it was all because of me. Chapter 37, My Glorious Return. Dad drove me to school my first day back from suspension. so I wouldn't have to ride the bus. I didn't want to sit where Rebecca and Danny pretend not to know me. They probably still liked me, but now I was the girl that got everybody in trouble. They couldn't hang out with me anymore, or everybody would hate them too. I didn't blame them. I just couldn't bear it, not on my first day back. Dad knew I was scared to go back. He didn't even tell me not to suck on my braids. I didn't know if he did it on purpose or not, but he dropped me off with a kiss right as the first bell rang. So everybody was already in class when I walked down the hall. I was going to get a tardy slip, but I wasn't too worried about it. Not like I would have to have been before. I wasn't a good girl anymore. I had been suspended for 3 days. Being on time for class didn't really seem all that important anymore. I was glad nobody was there when I got to my locker. Every day I went to my locker and put my combination on my lock to open it, but the lock was gone, of course. Mr. Crunchfield had cut it off. Suddenly, it was 3 days ago. I was standing exactly where I was now, and I watching Principal Borinsky open my locker and pull out all the banned books. I was crying in front of everyone. I started to cry again now, but not as bad, just a tear or two. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. I was going to have to open my locker again and put my books in and go to class. At least now it would be empty. I put all my my school books in where without having any to lug them around, but it wasn't empty. When I opened my locker, folded notes spilled out onto the floor. Dozens of them. My locker mailbox was been stuffed full, and more notes wouldn't fit had piled up inside my locker. I opened one with a pink loopy handwriting. AA. I'm so sorry you got suspended! Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Hang in there, Jonna. Another one. Dear Amy Ann's, my parents got that letter telling them I checked out a book from the BBLL. They didn't care. It stinks that you got suspended. Principal Banana is a doofus. Kevin. They were all like that. Fourth graders writing to tell me I got suspended, that Principal Borinsky and the school board was wrong, that their parents had gotten a letter from Mrs. Borinsky and said she would write, and either their parents didn't care or they didn't care that their parents were upset. I sat on the floor and opened every one. I cried again as I read them, but this time I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because everybody was so nice. I stuffed all the letters into my locker with my books. I dried my eyes and opened the door to Mr. Vaughn's classroom. Mr. Vaughn was in the middle of reading out a new list of vocabulary words when every head in the room turned and saw me. Rebecca squealed, jumped up, and ran across the room to hug me. Danny came over too and just stood nearby smiling at me. Everybody else broke out into cheering and clapping. Everybody but Trey. I was stunned by my class's response. I was sure everybody was going to hate me. I tried to call you, but your mom said you were grounded, Rebecca said. Did you see all the notes? Danny said. I told everyone the truth about why you got suspended. I didn't have a chance to answer then. Mr. Vaughn quieted everybody down and sent us to our seats. All right, he said. Welcome back, Amy Ann. As you can see, you were missed by everyone, including me. Now, if we can try to focus on our new vocabulary word, the next word is valiant. As soon as we got time, we could all get up and move around. Danny and a few other students hurried over to me. I was worried Mr. Vaughn was going to make us be quiet, but he pretended to be focused on something at his desk and didn't notice. I saw your picture on the news, Danny said, flicking his hair out his face. Did you hear Mrs. Jones got fired? Rebecca said. I know, I said. It still hurt to think about. Did you guys get in trouble? Nah. I mean, we got the letter home like everybody else, but that's it. There's going to be a special school board meeting, someone said. My mom said I can go. Me too, the others said. What are we going to do now? Danny asked me. What do you mean? What's next? Rebecca said. How do we get Mrs. Jones and all the books back? Get Mrs. Jones and all the book back? How is that even possible? How on earth would I think of an answer? It was over. The BBLO was finished, and so was I. But I didn't say that. All I said was, I don't know. Well, wait till Helen comes, Danny said. Then they'll be sorry. We don't have to wait till Helen comes, Rebecca said. We've got Amy in. Mr. Vaughn coughed, which told us it was time to get back to doing some real work. Rebecca and Danny smiled as they left. Which made me feel even worse. What was everybody going to think when they realized there was nothing I could do? There was nothing any of us could do to fix everything. I looked up and saw Trey standing in front of me from across the room. My fists clenched, my face got hot. In 3 days since I'd been suspended, I had felt sad, then sorry, then hopeless, then depressed. But now I was just mad. I was starting to think that giving Trey that big old knuckle sandwich might be worth another 3 days suspension. Chapter 38. I mean, 39. Mirror Universe. I was marching across the cafeteria to give Trey a piece of my mind, or maybe a piece of my fist, when Jeffrey Gonzalez appeared in front of me like somebody transporting in one of those science fiction shows he watched. I almost knocked him over. Amy Ann, he said. Hey, Jeffrey, excuse me. I need to go punch somebody in the face. Jeffrey looked nervously behind him, wondering who I was talking about. Oh, okay. I just wanted to say I was sorry, for getting you suspended. I stopped. What? I'm sorry I got you suspended, Jeffrey said. He looked a little worried, and I was going to punch him instead. How did you get me suspended? I asked. It was the book you gave me, Bridge to Terabithia. I read it, and it made me think about my grandmother who died. And when I was finished, I got really upset. My heart sank. I felt awful. I had meant for the Bridge of Terabithia to make Jeffrey feel bad. I had thought about maybe reading about somebody else who lost someone would make him understand he wasn't alone. Maybe show him there was a way out of the sadness. No, not like that, he said, seeing the worry on my face. I mean, it made me cry. Jeffrey looked around embarrassed. I couldn't stop crying. That's when mom and dad came into my room, so I kind of let it all out. I really hadn't cried since Granny died. I guess I needed to. Anyway, mom and dad saw it was the book that did it, and they called the principal, but not because they were mad. They called to say how great it was that Miss Jones had gave me the book. I saw it all in my head. Jeffrey's parents calling Principal Winsky, how Mrs. Jones had helped Jeffrey by giving him the right book. How wonderful. Mrs. Brinsky says, what book? The Bridge to Terabithia, they say, and alarms go off in the Principal Brinsky. She's heard of that book. It was on the banned book list. She goes to Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones says she never gave anybody the book. It's right here on the back shelf, or is it? But then where did Jeffrey get it? They made me tell, Jeffrey said. I'm so sorry. I never meant to give you in trouble, and neither did my parents. They're real sorry, too. They said they would call your parents and let them know. I looked at Trey from across the room, drawing on his sketch pad. A minute ago, I was ready to kill him for ratting me out, but it turned out he didn't have anything to do with it after all. It's okay, I told Jeffrey. I'm glad you feel better. And you really mean that you were really mean there for a little while. I know, Jeffrey said. It was the mirror universe me. The mirror universe you? Yeah, in Star Trek, there's a mirror universe where everybody is the opposite of what they are in this universe. So if you're good there, you're bad here. The mirror universe, Jeffrey took over there for a little while, but now Jeffrey Prime is back. Well, whoever you are now, I'm glad you're back. Jeffrey smiled and saluted me, his fingers in a V shape. Live long and prosper, he told me. You too. Instead of marching across to Trey, I went and stood in the cafeteria, thinking about Mirror Universe Amy Ann. Which one was the good one? Which one was the bad one? And the Amy Ann who never spoke up and never got into trouble, or the Amy Ann who refused to accept a bad decision by the school board and did something about it? Chapter 40. The biggest idea. The library was a very different place without Mrs. Jones in it. I stood at the entrance between the two pedestals of the book detectors on them. Even from there, I could feel the difference. It was a quieter in the library, sadder. It made my chest ache, like I had fallen off my bike and gotten the wind knocked out of me. The library was the only place in the world I loved, the only place that felt like it was mine, even if other people were there at the same time. The school library had been my home, but it wasn't my home or my library anymore. I didn't want to go a step further into the place, but I needed to return Indian Captain. I crept up to the front desk. There was a lady sitting there, a substitute for Mrs. Jones. She was a big white woman like Mrs. Jones and had glasses on a change. And like Mrs. Jones, only hers were square. She wore a colorful dress like Mrs. Jones, too, only it was red and white striped instead of polka dots. She looked at the copy of up from their copy of one of those celebrity magazines and said yes. It was creepy. Mrs. Jones should be sitting there, not this person. And I realized who she was. She was not the mirror Mrs. Jones. She was the mirror Mrs. Jones. Just returning a book, I said, and dropped it on the counter and ran. Ran right into Trey McBride. Neither of us fell down, but a stack of papers he'd been carrying went flying all over the floor. Sorry, I said. Shh. Mrs. Jones said. The real Mrs. Jones never shushed people in the library. I immediately bent to help Trey pick up his papers, and then I finally saw what I was picking up. Wait, what's this? I asked him. It's Their request for records reconsideration forms. The forms Mrs. Jones was always telling Trey's mom she had to fill out if she wanted to challenge a book. I flipped through them. Each and every one was a request for a reconsideration form for a different book that hadn't been banned. Not yet. These forms were asking that they all be removed from the library. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was they hadn't even been filled out by Mrs. Spencer. These are all in your handwriting, I said. No talking, Mrs. Jones barked at me with making me jump. I pushed the papers back into Trey's hands and kept on pushing him back into the hall. You're as bad as your mom, I yelled at him when we were out of the library. It's bad enough she already banned half the books in the library. Now you go and ban the other half? I said. I didn't know if this was the real Amy Ann or the mirror Amy Ann, but she was back and she wasn't going to be quiet anymore. He tried to say, but I cut him off. At first, I hated you. You drew that awful picture of me as a mouse last year and it hurt my feelings. Then we had to work together on our Bill of Rights project, and I thought you were different and I started to like you. Then I thought you ratted me out to the locker library busted, and I hated you all over again. But then I found out it wasn't you who turned me in, and I started to like you again. And now this. She snatched some of the papers from him and read out the titles he wanted to ban. Sounder, The Indian Cupboard, The Chronicles of Drain, My Teacher is an Alien, The Kid Only Hits Homers. Are you kidding about this? If you just let me, what's going to happen when you challenge every single book in this library? What then, Trey? I'll tell you what will happen. You challenge every book for some stupid reason you can think of, and there won't be a single book left for anyone to check out. Exactly, Trey said. What? I didn't understand. What was he seriously trying to do? Are you finished? Can I talk now? Trey said. I nodded, still confused. Okay. First, you hated me because the picture I drew last year, my face burned red hot. I couldn't believe I'd actually told him. But this was the new Amy Ann, the one who wasn't going to keep quiet anymore. I took a deep breath. Yes, you drew me as a mouse. Reading a book, Trey said. But I'm as a mouse. Everybody else got to be lions and eagles and cheetahs and things. Mouse are like quiet and timid. Yes, I huffed. So were you. I mean, you're not now, he said, straightening his shirt from where I'd pushed him. But you always had your nose in a book and never said anything. And when everybody did said something to you, it was like you were having a conversation with them in your head, but you never said anything out loud. That's crazy, I wanted to tell him. I don't have conversations with other people in my head. But I blushed. He was right. I did it all the time, and I was doing it right now. You're right, I said. I hated to admit it, but it was true. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings, Trey said. I didn't mean to. That's just how I saw you. I wouldn't draw you the same way now. Okay, so what's the deal with the request for reconsideration forms? I asked. Trey smiled. What better way to show everybody how stupid it is to ban books than to take it as far as we can? Once you ban a book, you can ban them all. To straighten out the mess of papers. This is just a start. When I'm finished, there won't be one book left on Shelbourne Elementary shelves. Just wait until the TV cameras get a hold of that. So, you don't really want to ban the books? I asked. I never wanted any books banned. That was my mom's idea. I like Captain Underpants. I'm trying to draw a book like it. Of course, Trey's mom hadn't known about Captain Underpants until he decided to check it out from the library in the first place. Every time I saw him, Trey was drawing. That must have been why Mrs. Jones introduced him to Dave Pilkey. She knew he wanted to draw a book like Captain Underpants. I'm so sorry, I told him. I always thought you agreed with your mom. So did everybody else, Trey said. I nodded. The forms in the hands. But if you do this, if you get all the book banned, everybody's going to think you really agreed with her. Trey shrugged. It doesn't matter now. Everybody hates me because of her. I felt awful. I'd done the same thing, blamed him for what his mom was doing. I'll I'm the one who to do it, said Trey. Maybe it will, in the end, everybody will see why I did it and they won't kill me first. There's thousands of books, I said. It'll take all year and they'll probably figure out what you're trying to do before you can finish. I have to do something. I knew exactly what he meant. It was the same way I felt when I'd started the BBLL. It was exactly the same way I felt now. Don't turn these in, I told him. Not yet. Turn them in all at once. When? Like you said, that'll take forever. It needs to happen now while people still care. I know, which is why we're going to need some help. We? He said. We, I said. And that's where we will stop. We will pick up with chapter 41 on Monday. And the name of that one chapter is 24 farts. So you will have to tune back in to see how Amy Ann and her board for the banned books library locker figure out a way to stop the school board from banning all the books.